The workshop is now starting. All attendees are in a listen-only mode. The session will be recorded and the recording may be made available to others. The participants list is private. The chat function is in private mode as well. Only the speakers and the moderator receive the chat messages. If you do not wish to continue based on the above, please log out. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to today's mindsON Centralized Monitoring Workshop, an initiative by Synergizing My RBQM Academy. I'm Tamara, the Operations Manager of the Academy. In this session, we want to talk about the optimization of clinical trials by synergizing on-site and centralized monitoring for enhanced quality and performance. This workshop will run for approximately 90 minutes. It is an interactive session with polls, brainstorms, and time for your questions and our answers at the end. So feel free to submit your questions and comments throughout the workshop using the chat box that you see on the right side, please. About our speakers. Yuriy Lebed, after graduating as a general practitioner, Yuriy entered as Ph.D. fellow program at the Bahomalets Institute National Academy of Sciences. Then he became a co-founder of Pharmaxi CRO in 2013 and is currently CEO at Pharmaxi LLC and Pharmaxi Poland. Artem Andrianov, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Synergizing, with over 25 years of experience on a wide range of projects in the pharmaceutical industry. Artem is a highly accomplished and very experienced professional in the area of biostatistics and clinical data quality. As said at the beginning, we want to make this workshop interactive. So this means later in this session, I will unlock a toolbar so we can brainstorm together. In this toolbar, you will see an icon with a mug and pens over here. Next, you can click on the T and then it opens a box and you can start writing. Click the OK button to send your text and your message will appear directly on our whiteboard here. And of course, your entries are anonymous. So please don't be shy and brainstorm with us later when it is time. Good, that was just a short introduction from my side. Now let's start with the workshop and I would like to pass it on to Artem, please.
Thank you, Tamara. So I hope I'm audible well. So this workshop actually probably will have a lot of attention from research experts because just a couple of days ago we saw a very interesting move from FDA that published another guidance, first time since 10 years, a risk-based approach to monitoring of clinical investigations, questions and answers. So this document became available on FDA website. And in fact, a lot of topics we will be touching today are aligned with this guidance. And a lot of topics, again, we needed to adjust during the preparation to this workshop. So hopefully that we will touch upon all the aspects of building a holistic way of monitoring within clinical investigations. So the agenda for today's session is actually very straightforward. We wanted to touch upon fraud and misconduct overall as a topic, why they're happening, what are the motives behind, how to handle these motives and foresee them, how to be practical in tackling the first signs of fraud and misconduct. Then we wanted to look on on-site monitoring in particular, so best practices there. Yeah, so what it is good for, what are the main advantages of that. Then on centralized monitoring, again, what it is good for, what are the main advantages for that. And last but not least, we want to create a holistic strategy by merging together all monitoring methods that are available for CROs and sponsor companies. And we wanted to discuss on the way, in fact, and hear your opinion. What are your experiences in using this combination, creating a holistic strategy? So I'm very happy to welcome Yuriy today, because Yuriy will provide really hands-on experience on running or clinical trials, in fact, with on-site, with centralized monitoring, and Pharmaxi. So the company is a good partner of Synergizing. So we have also, as actually the situation with Ukrainian war started, we donated, in fact, our product to Ukrainian CROs, and Pharmaxi was one of them. So again, hope here, Yuriy, to hear a lot of your hands-on experience examples, and just looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you, Artem, for introduction.
All right, let's move forward. So I think we, as long as the agenda is so everybody's comfortable with the agenda, and as long as we are knowing the path, let us touch upon the publication, which again, to me, this publication is like a roadmap for clinical trial sponsors and CROs. So a lot started to be more clear when this guidance appeared. So again, look at the on this link. In fact, and since a couple of days, it is now available for download. So in fact, this is the result of again 10 years of experience, because the first guidance of FDA about risk-based monitoring generally appeared in 2013. So now, 10 years later, FDA reflected on every aspect which was unclear. For example, about the monitoring plans, about the risk assessment in general, how to deal with that. So how to determine the monitoring activities, types, frequencies. Should it be regular activity, for example, adjusting the monitoring strategy, or should it be a one-time decision? So these questions were answered in this guidance. And if again somebody from our audience is looking for a plan, how to write monitoring plan for an upcoming study, I think that's the first document they should take a look at. And again, hopefully we could guide you through that as well during this session. So Yuriy, maybe I could ask you, what is your first impressions when you've looked at this guidance? Any, I don't know, can you refer to any first emotions, or something surprised you, or something, or was it everything that you expected?
Oh, that's a good question. And you know, rarely guideline could arise emotional response, you know, and this is the case when it was a really emotional response, because this is perfectly created, perfectly written short guideline. It is a condensed summary of the best practices recommended by FDA, and I was really excited to see new ideas in this guideline. And the most emotional for me, and most unexpected thing for me, is that FDA guidelines stated now that monitoring plan should be dynamic document, and there should be several revisions of this document based on new findings, which are happened during the clinical trial. And this was the main difference from the like classical understanding of the monitoring plan. And usually sponsor creates monitoring plan one time, and then it is not oftenly updated based on new findings and understanding of new criticalities. So it was the first surprising point. And the second surprising point was that this monitoring plan this guidance say that the approach for the monitoring should be based on the re-evaluation of risks, identification of new risks, and sites should be not equally monitored, and sites should be monitored based on their performance, based on the quality of data they generate. And this is a second interesting point which was highlighted, and I suppose that this guideline will increase the quality of clinical data and will become a good guidance to create internal SOPs for CROs and sponsors to enhance approaches to ensure better data quality.
I agree with you. So my first impression was also that FDA started to react on the dynamics of modern life, which again, during the clinical trial life, so to say, a lot happens, and sometimes fundamental risks or global risk realize, like pandemics or wars. And obviously adjusting the monitoring plan, I think, becomes a logical consequence of such dynamic life, which we're currently experiencing. So I felt as well that it's a kind of coach's playbook, so to say, which provides good strategies, tactics to clinical research sponsor companies and CROs to make well-informed decisions when planning and executing monitoring activities. So let's see how this guideline will be implemented by the industry, and in fact, will it have certain direct reaction, so to say, and I hope that pharmaceutical companies start using it as a compass of their clinical trials. So let us take a look on areas which we started in the previous session, so about fraud and misconduct, and we use obviously these examples as maybe a very ultimate examples of what could happen in clinical research. So misconduct happens commonly. We will be talking about it. Fraud, again, at least intentional, I hope, not so commonly. Nevertheless, the main strategy is to be prepared. And now, again, with a combination of different monitoring tools, we are able to pick up the right tool for the right challenge and see what could be used. So in our previous session, we mentioned that obviously there are many types of fraud cases, many types of misconduct cases. So starting like fabrication, falsification, making up the data, manipulating the data results. So these are the ultimate examples. And we know, according to the literature, that approximately 1% of clinical research studies are affected by literally by such such situations like manipulating the clinical research results. Nevertheless, 1% is those cases which were identified and confirmed. So based on our experience, we're speaking about 10% of clinical trials which in one or another way experience some sort of fraudulent behaviors. When we look on the motives, and this is, I think, very, very crucial to understand what are the motives behind fraud and misconduct. So we could classify them on intentional and non-intentional. So very understandable motives are financial gains, or career advancements. Certain misguided organizational culture, I think it's very interesting areas, so to say, where certain, for example, employees are set under tension or under particular pressure, and that can also result into unethical behavior. So I can compare general these situations like athletes who are kind of using the certain performance enhancing drugs to gain unfair advantage. So similarly to that, fraud and misconduct in clinical research are like those athletes who are manipulating data to deviate from protocols to achieve desired outcomes. And this could be dangerous on its own. So it's like a rotten apple which you put into the basket with other apples, and the other apples get spoiled. So one of the effect of the fraud cases is, for example, that dishonest practices can damage the reputation and trustworthiness of the whole research community. And we saw such cases, unfortunately, in the past. And that's why I think it's so crucial to elaborate the strategies to build up the tactics inside of our monitoring activities to prevent this happening in the future. One area, so to say, which particularly was interesting for me to understand is that certain cognitive biases and personal beliefs could be also a trigger to conduct misconduct, in fact, and that's our more unintentional approaches where such bias like confirmation bias, where there is a certain understanding about the world and researcher wants to confirm this understanding. So that's typical confirmational bias, which again leads to a researcher to manipulate data one way or another. So that's, to my mind, again, being aware about such motives, I think, very, very important. So when we take a look on on-site monitoring, and Yuriy, now I want to ask about your experience. Okay, how can we use the benefits of on-site monitoring, the advantages of on-site monitoring to tackle these motives? And again, what are the strengths, so to say, of this approach? Maybe could you elaborate on that?
Okay, thank you, Artem. So yes, I would like to speak about on-site monitoring in this context, and I would like to highlight the strengths of on-site monitoring and limitations, and in the next part of the presentation of the workshop, we will try to combine centralized monitoring, trying to enhance efficiency of on-site monitoring taking advantages of centralized monitoring and organically combining them, we can come to a good strategy to minimize limitations of on-site monitoring, to create more efficient strategy for data oversight. So I would like to start from the monitoring plan as a key element of on-site monitoring, and the latest FDA recommendations has been focused on monitoring plan, and the majority of advices and the majority of new insights relates to monitoring plan in this FDA guideline. And the most important thing here is that monitoring plan development should be started from risk assessment, and risk assessment process should be built in two dimensions. And the first dimension is the criticality of data, and the author of monitoring plan should understand how to extract the most critical data from the study protocol. And if we think that study protocol is a big document, and someone very experienced should understand and should identify the most critical data. And the second dimension is the risks and understanding of likelihood of those risks and severity of those risks. It's mostly focused on procedures built in the clinical trial. So this new FDA recommendation say that monitoring plans should be created, taking into account these two different dimensions. And a monitoring plan should provide guidance of how to adjust monitoring activities based on findings. This is what I said about dynamic approach of the monitoring strategy. So here we try to go aside from the static numbers, and the monitoring plan should not say that every site should be monitored regularly, or each 5 patient enrolled in this study site should be a trigger to monitor this site. And it's simple to write. It's simple to implement in the monitoring plan. It's simple to plan this activity, but it is not a best approach to the monitoring. And this assessment of new findings and flexible schedule for monitoring different study sites will give additional level of the attention to those sites which generates questionable data, or not so clean data, or fraudulent data, and this will increase the quality of data. The next point, which is mentioned in the FDA recommendation, says about the development of monitoring plan in line with needs of the particular clinical investigation. So it should be taken a very big bunch of efforts to think about specifics of the given clinical trial, and not to go in line with the usual concept that for each study we will take into account these risks, and it is not the right way. And the author of monitoring plan has to adjust monitoring plan to the specifics of the particular clinical investigation. And another idea highlighted in this new guideline is that information regarding identified risks should be described in line with proper monitoring methods which will address these risks. So here is a new dimension when identified risks should be matched with relevant methods, which allows to identify and mitigate those risks.
Yuriy, I have a question to you. While you elaborate on monitoring plan, how do you kind of choose the likelihood of certain events? So how do you understand what event will be likely or less likely in this study?
I suppose that everything what is dependent on the people is most likely happened, and if some procedures could be automatically controlled by digital systems, or transfer of data from one system to another, or if randomization module is fully digitalized, then the likelihood of some problem is minimal, and the likelihood of complex procedures which should be done by person, likelihood of the problem is higher, and the more complex this procedure is, the more chances that the likelihood of problem will be here. The likelihood of the problem will be here higher, and depending on, for example, if we say about the processing of samples, blood samples, there are several steps which are critical from the timing standpoints or temperature, and the likelihood that someone will miss this procedure or will keep this sample longer than it is needed is high, and those procedures should be subject of the additional control, and these risks should be severe, because if multiple samples processed by one person who is not properly trained or not properly instructed, the likelihood and severity of the problem with these samples will be really damaging for the final conclusions of the study.
So as far as I can hear, you are not trusting people, and in fact, assessing the complexity, I think that's very useful strategy. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So for me, monitoring plan is like a navigational document of a ship in the rough waters, where a captain or a crew can understand, okay, what to keep an eye on, like how to keep an eye on the course, where ship is going, independently on weather conditions or potential hazards, or so how to ensure that there is a safe and secure journey, so to say, still happens.
Yes, sure. Okay, so as a conclusion, monitoring plan should be made by an expert who can really reveal those risks. And from my personal experience, people tend to create a monitoring plan based on the existing template, and it's very, very hard to train this person to take into account all specifics of new study and enroll new risks which are obvious for the next study, and other study will have another riskiest elements, and this may be a most important qualification requirement for the author of monitoring plan, because this is the most challenging element of the highly tailored or adjusted monitoring plan to study specifics. Monitoring plan should be focusing on the riskiest element of the given study, and the biggest mistake is when monitoring plan tries to embrace everything, tries to embrace all data points, all procedures, and in the very beginning, the author of this monitoring plan tries to control everything, but it is not a proper practice, and only riskiest elements should be mentioned in the monitoring plan. And the third conclusion is that monitoring plan should be realistic. So if we know that monitoring could happen just one time per month, and enrollment will be really active, then it's hard to expect that many data and many procedures could be performed on site. So the main problem of monitoring plan is that good monitoring plan is never able to cover all data collected during the study. And I faced someday with the worst monitoring plan where it was stated that monitor has to verify 100% pages for 100% CRFs. And yes, it's easy to state, but it's hard to make it real. And I suppose that monitoring plan should be focused on the riskiest elements, and the latest guideline confirm this idea. And therefore, we admit that some areas are not covered by monitoring activities, but later on we will talk how to compensate this so-called weakness of monitoring plan, and how to not to miss really important data.
Mm-hmm. And Yuriy, when you speak about experts that needs, we have a question from Susan, and she asks if who should be involved into this preparation? Should there be primary investigators involved, statisticians or coordinators, all of them, some of them? So what is your experience?
My understanding that the best author of monitoring plan is project manager, who conducted many different projects. The keyword is different. Because when I contacted and spoke with our employees, with Pharmaxi employees, first monitoring plan became like a standard for the next monitoring plan, and there should be a big level of flexibility in the mind of this monitor. And when project manager of this author, and when project manager conducted 10, 12, 20 clinical trials, they can understand which riskiest points in the new protocol here. And this is only a matter of repeated experience when someone faces with different study designs, and unfortunately with different risks identified in the previous studies. And when project manager observed a new finding which was not mentioned in the old monitoring plan, he became more aware that this space in clinical trial is really important, and next monitoring plan for next study or updated monitoring plan for this study should keep attention, should take into account this area or these activities.
Yeah. So the challenge in your strategy is where to find a project manager right away, so to say, who has conducted already 10 or 15 studies, different studies, as you meant.
Yes,
and,
that's
that's
the main problem. Yes,
and when they have done this so many studies, they probably leave to another company, and another company means then other people and other processes. That means also different risks there. So that's why again this question, provocative question. Yeah. So okay, how do you deal with that?
Yes, the only one approach is to engage the most experienced project manager to create, or at least to review, created monitoring plan, and to note what is missing, and which procedure or which part of the investigation should be additionally monitored. And this is the essence of this risk evaluation in the beginning of the process. So my understanding that prior monitoring plan development, those risks should be evaluated, classified, and mentioned. And in the end of the process of monitoring plan creation, the most experienced person should review this monitoring plan and reevaluate or reassess those risks mentioned in the document.
Thank you. So let's move forward.
Yeah. Okay. So the next key component of the on-site monitoring obviously is on-site monitoring activities. So everyone knows the main area of responsibility for on-site monitors, and I just created a list of essential responsibilities for CRAs, and maybe routine monitoring visits is the complex and regular activity which is really challenging in terms of providing all types of activities which are expected from the CRAs. And here I would say that in many cases CRA don't have enough time to perform all those activities, and this is reality, and I suppose that centralized monitoring and additional tools and approaches could create CRA schedule on-site more targeted, oriented on more critical data, and this can make CRA visit more efficient. And we know that sometimes expectations for on-site monitoring visit is that like a simple picture when CRA just come to a study site, and he and PI is waiting for him, and then PI introduce CRA to the study team, and all documents are available in one room, and then EDC system is fully populated, primary documentation is fully prepared, and if some questions arose from CRA, responsible person is available, and communication is fast and concise. But in reality, access to documents takes some time, and sometimes primary investigator is not available for the majority of time, and he has some responsibilities in his clinic. So it's challenging to speak with him, to understand what happened in the frame of this study. And very often primary documentation is not fully populated, and just there is no basis for SDV, and EDC system is not populated, and some depths are here, and data are not transferred from paper format to EDC system, and team members are also busy, and they are involved in other tasks and procedures on site, and many other non-planned questions arose during the monitoring visit. And in the end of the story, CRA has very limited time to make SDV even for critical data. I even don't say about the 100% SDV.
Mm-hmm. We have heard that some of our clients report that sometimes PI asks to populate data, the CRA who write to their site. So have you heard about such cases, and how can CROs or sponsors prevent this happening? What do you think?
Yes, I've heard about this several times, and it's someday it was a big discovery for me, because I suppose that investigator fee is quite big, and the investigator should perform all responsibilities by themselves or by involved study team. But in some cases, it happened when CRO works with so-called stars, and when the star is involved, he knows that he will be enrolled in new study, because this person has big name, and I suppose that the majority of these cases relates to big names, professors and other guys who are not willing to do routine work, and even to supervise what should be done on site. And sometimes they say, oh, okay, you are CRA, you want the proper quality of the document, feel free to create this quality. and this was a surprise for me when I know it about some sites everywhere in Europe. It could happen. It is not only Eastern Europe or some other countries, and I've heard this about Western European study sites. So it is more or less universal problem. Yes, and I suppose that maybe it could be a complex solution, and maybe case report form could be simpler if it is possible. And several days ago, I heard a story that it was two biotechs competing in the same indication, and there were two study protocols, and one of those study protocols were simpler by design, and CRM was simpler, and the enrollment of patients was higher, and completeness of the document and willingness of investigators to participate in this trial was higher. And this biotech started study later than competitor, but they closed study for much earlier than their competitors, and they achieved their FDA approval much faster. So I think that one risk mitigating action could be implemented in the protocol design?
That's where it starts from, and a lot of risks could really be reduced by simplifying the protocols, reducing the amount of the number of endpoints, which primary endpoints, secondary endpoints. That's of course improve the chances of successful and quick study implementation significantly. And I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's a big question, and we also can think about other organizational measures, and we also recommend in our trials that we would like to initiate many sites than it is planned, and if sponsor agree with this plan, and we initiate more sites, than if some site performs not a good way for some reason, we have space and freedom to stop this study site, and it is not impact on the whole study metrics and deadlines. But again, this action should be understood in the beginning of the study, in the beginning of the planning phase. And if we need 6 sites, we try to submit 8 or 9 study sites. And this is our risk mitigating actions to include additional sites faster. Okay, can we go on?
Yes.
Good. So the third interesting component of effective on-site monitoring is toolbox, and CRA could efficiently use electronic data capture system, especially for the preparation for the on-site monitoring visit, and risk-based monitoring tools are also important tools to make on-site monitoring visit much efficient, and Artem will speak in detail about it. Site visit checklist is also important and powerful tool when site visits prepared in advance, and then CRA is focusing on mentioned checklists and is not distracted by occasional findings and distracted by different other things. Query management is also an important tool to create queries on site, and to not forget about some data which should be clarified, and the training and support can be also mentioned as a tool to train sites or retrain study sites. And if some common findings observed in multiple study sites, maybe the best strategy is not to train them every time, every visit, but create one presentation or e-learning module, and then collect many people one time and retrain them on some important elements of the study, or important procedures of the protocol one time. Okay, so this is the vision of about the on-site monitoring, and I would like to give a word to Artem to speak about benefits of centralized monitoring in this context.
Thank you. So I'm glad that you mentioned a lot of methods which how CRA visits the site and builds up relationships with site staff. In fact, set up the expectations, makes a quality control by verifying the source data. Centralized monitoring in this context, for me, looks like a surveillance system in a security setup. Yeah, so where multiple cameras are attached to real-time data from various locations, and they look at the, in fact, they are an efficient how efficient the process is going on, prompt when something is going wrong. So it's like a traffic control center, so to say, where of a clinical trial. So it has its own advantages, again, by making the oversight from, for example, by means of comparing the sites with between each other, or patients between each other. So countries, again, looking at the trends, understanding the patterns, anomalies, and deviations. So most of these deviations are hard to detect manually, particularly nowadays. You mentioned the complexity of the protocols. You mentioned the availability of the digital systems. And I myself, spending many years in the companies where, for example, these digital systems were developed, I know the cases and situations where mistake happens, which are hard to detect by human, but as it is done within a digital system, it's multiplied by many studies, by many sponsors, and many years get unnoticed. So this is in fact where complexity of the digital systems, amount of data, they add to this problem, unfortunately, more. And that's why there is a kind of almost a need or requirement to have a centralized monitoring control mechanism to verify that the patterns are kind of in needed space, that there is no anomalies or deviations that require further investigation, and so on and so forth. So key aspects of centralized monitoring, and again, I want to make this very quick because majority of our listeners, I assume, are aware about it, so that centralized monitoring is particularly useful to understand the timeliness of data entries. And that's what I was referring to when I was asking you about the misuse, so to say, of CRA efforts. You could verify the audit trail information, and you could put a key risk indicator of timeliness of data entry. And the pattern, look at the pattern there. So that gives you a hint by whom the data was entered. So this is also one of the risk indicators which we in fact advise by default, looking at the audit trail. So audit trail is a fantastic source of information. It's amazing how much you could read out of it about the sloppiness, about the misconduct, about potential even fraud. Query resolution time, very important kind of piece of information. Again, you could look and infer if a site is overloaded or a site has similar studies in parallel. And again, there is some competition between studies, which happens, by the way, quite commonly. How complete are the data? Is the data set? So if there is some missed information, and data completeness, in fact, to my mind, is one of the crucial elements, because the more you wait, the longer you wait, the less chances are that the correct data is entered in the database. So in fact, you could, again, actively work with on-site monitoring visits, asking right questions, why this particular CRF is not complete, what is going on, why this systematic issue happens in this case. And overall, of course, main aspects of compliance, protocol deviations, controlling them, seeing the patterns of that, I believe it's very crucial. Site performance, so enrollment, what site has promised in feasibility analysis, and what is actually happening in reality. I feel that's very, very important to see. Monitor early and again, understand if there are some issues in enrollment which were not visible during the feasibility study. I want to say that, in fact, classical SDV, which we know many, many, many years, in fact, has its own limitations. And I want to demonstrate this very quickly in this on this graph. So imagine there is a path of data creation and data journey, so to say. And data get collected from patients. Usually, again, subjects are kind of involved. Then it lands in the source data within a site, gets transferred to case report form. Then it goes into central database. Usually this is EDC database, get collected, processed there. Some parameters are calculated usually, and statisticians have access to these databases usually. Then there is an export prepared for FDA, EMA, or local governmental organization. And again, there is an approval, which again, or not approval, so to say, based on the results of the study. So in all this pipeline of data creation, SDV focused just on this part, this step. Yeah. So which obviously shows you that here this is uncontrolled step. And here happens a lot of cases where patients, for example, misuse, so to say, this study infrastructure. There are professional patients, which are, as a term, well known to the audience, I hope. So patients who are participating in clinical trials on a regular basis. Unfortunately, we know these situations when sites know such patient and they call them intentionally. They call them when they need enrollment. So it's actually like so fraudulent behavior happens on both cases. So sites are involved, patients are involved. And when sites are in a certain critical situation, when they need enrollment, they call. In certain countries, there is even possibility to order patients, like similar like you order food in a restaurant. And you need 20 patients, you call, and next day you have 20 patients for whatever therapeutic area you need. Again, this all goes in the direction of misconduct and fraud. Yes, and this is in fact why it is so crucial to have one umbrella approach on the data pipeline, on the data creation pipeline. So monitoring also these cases. Whenever data is transferred to DDC systems, there are some situations happens there. So again, we know I was witnessing a lot of situations where, for example, data couldn't be transferred because of various issues with the internet. Where before it was modem transferring, there were also cases where, for example, sites were located in India and there is very poor telephone connection, so to say. And when we were like a lot of modem connections were used, you couldn't transfer data there. So, and they were sending memory sticks, yeah, so by post. And sometimes they got lost. And in fact, that's also part of the problem. And this is, in fact, memory sticks and very commonly remain as one of the media to transfer big amount of information. Yeah, whenever you have video files or some imaging information. So in modern days, still remain as one of the valid source of transferring information. And again, some countries are more reliable, some countries are less reliable in this case. And here, unfortunately, happens as well situations. And I also witnessed a very critical situation from one big, very phase 3 study where sponsor exported information, and unfortunately, due to error in export, only 40% of the data was exported, and that was not noticed by sponsor and by EDC company. So that the export was validated perfectly fine, worked in the validation conditions, so to say. Whenever a real condition happened, when some parameters were not there, that triggered a certain error in the export, and these patients were skipped. they submitted the data to FDA, and only FDA, actually, by looking what was planned and what was submitted, started to ask questions. 3 years later, after publications, huge hassle, a lot of discussions and problems, so to say. But this happened as well. And this, in fact, to my mind, also important to observe, if there are such risks that might happen by exporting. And validation, unfortunately, not always really a cure against such risks. All right. So any comment, question? Okay. I think, Tamara, you wanted to...
I am ready to start with the poll, yes. Thank you very much, Artem. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a question for you, please. What do you think is the most critical factor in ensuring the successful integration of on-site and centralized monitoring in clinical trials? And here you can select more than one answer if you think that's appropriate. What do you think is the most critical factor in ensuring successful integration of on-site and centralized monitoring in clinical trials? I see the answers coming in here. That's great. Yeah, I still wait a bit. People still selecting. Thank you. Good, thanks very much. I'm presenting the results now, Artem.
Yep. So I'm quite happy to see here the more or less equal distribution between the answers. So obviously dominating is clear communication collaboration between on-site and centralized team. Very important aspect. I couldn't agree more with that. We see so many issues while, for example, the centralized monitoring is onboarded within an organization, there is a certain resistance to embrace it. And this resistance obviously is solvable through communicational channels. Then I see, risk-based monitoring strategies tailored to each study's specific needs. It's also a very critical element, I believe, particularly to understand that each study is individual, has its individual peculiarities or uniqueness, and not only therapeutic area influences it, but also study design. So I think that what Yuriy, you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, adjusting the risks from the protocols or using the protocols as a source of understanding what are the main risks. I feel that's what is meant here as well. Any comments, Yuriy, from your side or impressions?
I suppose that it is interesting illustrations that almost all mentioned elements are important to create a strategy. So maybe it is the illustration that a combination of centralized and monitoring activities is not just one simple decision.
Mm-hmm.
To successfully implement this integrated approach, we have to change many elements of the study governance. Even on the company level, we have to make some changes to provide a proper data exchange and informational exchange between departments, for example. And since centralized monitoring is mostly relates to data and technology, and on-site monitoring is mostly about people. So we have to create a bridge between technologies and people, and to create proper procedures on many levels of the company, and depending on the complexity of the CRO, on the complexity of the company which manages clinical trial, this task will need more efforts to implement this approach to the daily routine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm closing this poll now, and we can come right away to our next exercise. And this is the whiteboard that I've already mentioned at the beginning here. So I'm unlocking a toolbar for you now. And again, when you click on the right side in that gray menu bar on the mug with the pens, and next click on the T box, then you can start writing. So what do you think? Let's brainstorm a little bit. How can we emerging technologies improve synergy between on-site and centralized monitoring to enhance fraud detection in clinical trials? And don't be shy, please. This whiteboard is anonymous. Whenever you send us a statement, we don't know who it comes from. All is good.
Yeah.
So I said the tool is available when you click on the icon with the cup and the pens and then the T box. Great, thank you very much. Just rearranging here the answers a little bit so we can see it all. And in the meantime, Artem, perhaps we can already start discussing the answers here.
Yep, I see a lot of interesting responses. Of course, centralized statistical monitoring is mentioned here. I believe it's very important to have this method and apply it, in fact, to detect statistical anomalies or to detect anomalies we use in statistical methods. So it was mentioned, by the way, in the recent FDA guidance as well, using the statistical methods to detect misconduct and anomaly. Very important. Again, particularly exciting for me to see also that showing to a CRA risk profile of a center before CRA visits this center, and providing presumably additional information about what to ask. So using the time efficiently of a CRA, and turning CRA into more mentor our site rather than a detector of certain errors. What I see here, live notes in EDC systems to have centralized record. Yeah, that's important. A tool or methods as well, rather than emails or queries, than a part of audit trails. Yeah, that's a good in fact aspect to collect information near to the source data or near to the CRF data, in fact, to understand the problems which sites are facing. Learning from patterns, I see here statistical monitoring can detect patterns very better than human eye, for sure. I can agree more. Usually by human eye is good into the looking into certain fields, understanding the maybe logical inconsistencies. But whenever we want to look at the bird eye view about comparing sites between each other, for example, or looking through the time analysis, that's where pattern, so centralized monitoring and technology starts helping. And of course, using of AI, I see here particularly exciting now. For example, GTP technology or chat GTP technology, which everybody probably have heard in one way or another. At Integrity, we started to use it already for planning the mitigation actions in advance. So integrate into the RBQM solution so that monitoring plan could come to a more specific mitigation actions, or give an idea to a human, so to say, to come to more specific mitigation actions and corrective actions. Yeah. So, any comments, Yuriy, from your side?
Yes, for me, I think that maybe the most important here is understanding of patterns and ability to use algorithms inbuilt in the EDC system or RBQM system to automate data analysis, to highlight some data as a questionable or fraudulent data. And also in our experience, the most important discoveries have been created monitoring trends and comparing trends between different study sites. And what is not obvious when we try to analyze one page or one form or one patient, becoming more obvious when we analyze differences between patients or one parameter in the whole study for many patients. More questions and findings are here. Then another level of the analysis is when we try to create time change of one parameter for one patient, and this gives additional understanding for those parameters which cannot be flexible. Sometimes I identified a big difference between visit 1 and visit 2, and the height in visit 2 was 160 centimeters and height in visit 6 is 180 centimeters. So someone grows 20 centimeters for 1 month, and it is a comparison in the time gives understanding that some data is wrong, and it is impossible to understand it and analyzing just one form without time wise curve. And another level of comparison and data could be discovered when we compare data and trends in different study sites. And again, some data become questionable or fraudulent when we compare data between sites.
Thank you. So we mentioned a lot of times that a holistic way, so to say, is one of the future of approach in strategy. We mentioned, in fact, also that risk-based approach obviously is a fundamental element of all the other activities that are happening later on. And that's in fact where we see how risk-based quality management becomes to evolve in organization. And data-driven metrics, issue management, which is again one of the elements how to react on escalations. They are all collected. And in fact, what I believe is are very important byproducts of these activities to accumulate information about the probabilities of certain events within the organization. And why it is so important, because whenever somebody experienced that you mentioned leaving the company, you have this tacit knowledge download from an individual. And you can use this information. Okay, what are the probabilities of certain risks in my context, in my organization? So I feel that could be an important aspect. So how to implement these eyes and ears, for a sponsor company? So we usually advise 5 main areas to cover. So basically, we're always advising some risk indicators which controls data quality, risk indicators which controls patient safety, performance indicators about sites, how well they are doing, so the enrollment rate, retention rate, all that. Certain risk-based indicators are useful sometimes as well. For example, risk review frequency. So that's not something which is kind of usually done, but I believe it's also a parameter, particularly now in the context of new guidance, which you mentioned in the beginning. Again, how often we review the risk situation. Are we doing it regularly enough? And are we doing across all our sites, all our studies, so to say, on a similar regularity or not? Or is it like one-time exercise? And this is something which, again, I believe it's useful on its own. Risk detection rate, also something not very obvious, but in fact, how often we detect something in central tool, and that we could confirm that in sites. So what is the the success rate of detecting it centrally? And risk mitigation success rate as well. If we do certain activities in advance before risk comes into occurrence, how well we mitigate that. Again, this is something, to my mind, very important to know. Yuriy,
I have one interesting comment here. And so one day we decided to think about the efficiency of query generation, or risk detection rate, or efficiency of those generated queries. And we created a special parameter in EDC system in build, which shows us how many queries ended up with data editing by investigator. And the higher this parameter, the higher efficiency of this risk detection. And we can compare it between different CRAs or remote monitors, and we can identify who employ or use the more efficient strategy to generate queries. And 80% of those queries lead to data change or data editing by investigator. So it is really interesting metric to understand the efficacy of query generation process.
So
hello?
It looks like we've lost Artem for a second. Just a moment, please. We're trying to fixing this issue here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Artem, thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so of course, for doing this routine analysis of multiple data sources, it's essential to have a certain technological support. It's like, again, a smart system of a study which implements sensors, cameras, whatever, so to say, in a real-time notification to monitor various aspects of a study. So, and I believe in our in our offices, we have some smart security systems, and here in the study, we need something similar. So these are the eyes and ears of a sponsor and clinical research team, in fact, to scan the data from multiple sites and sources. Of course, and that was mentioned, by the way, in our brainstorming session, remote access to study, to real-time monitoring and remote access, I feel it's also very interesting and an essential element. Yeah. So again, like a security guard, you could monitor what is going on remotely within a site, and see the dashboards or see the real data, in fact, depending on this way how it is implemented. And that's also enhancing the communication collaboration in the current situation. Whenever everything goes remote, we can reduce also on-site visits with that by looking at this only from the aspect we visit the site when it's required. So a lot could be done remotely here. So supporting also the regulatory compliance. So whenever we want to create a holistic system, I believe we need to start observing the whole process, how we usually design a monitoring strategy, and on the way combine the tools that are that we were discussing. So on-site, centralized, remote. Yeah, let's agree on these three tools at least. So we mentioned, and this is again FDA confirmed, that each trial is unique. So we need to understand the peculiarities or characteristics of the size of this study by studying the protocol, obviously. Yeah, that all begins with that. And then defining the objectives, what we want to achieve. Here, very critical to understand critical data and critical processes, obviously critical to quality factors. So that's where these with these objectives gets formulated. Yeah, and here, as we always say on our webinars, critical thinking is required. So obviously a third or like a fourth vital element. And then you could start combining the centralized monitoring for example, anomaly detection, performance issue detection, and using on-site monitoring for building the relationships with the site, and coaching the site, mentoring the site, in fact. Building the risk-based approach, implementing the tools which supports you, so connecting the source data to that tools, defining the QTLs, quality tolerance limits, key risk indicators, key performance indicators. So these are the steps here. And again, always think about training education this side. So it's a lot about communication and accepting of these methods by the study research team. Obviously, because without that tool with a fool is still a fool, so to say, or fool with a tool is still a fool. That's obviously will not help if the site research team is not using these capabilities of these approaches. A communicational plan, race metrics, I think that's what are here important to mention, and adjusting the strategy regularly. That's a new thing, yeah, that happened since recent time. Yuri, we have 6 minutes left. Don't wish to put you under pressure, but keep
okay. Okay, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So here I would like to create some holistic approach to the identification of wrong data, and maybe in the first part of this story we have to identify proper sites based on their risk score, and then when this site is identified or top riskiest top 3, top 10 riskiest sites are identified, then it would be great to understand which patients associated with those sites, and then to run some algorithms and methods to identify proper patients, visits, and forms, and the number of data points, if it is possible, which are questionable or which needs additional attention or clarification, and this will give a clear listing of those questionable data, and this enhance a lot the efficiency of on-site monitoring. And on-site monitoring will be focused on predefined data, so CRA will not spend a lot of time trying to identify and to find inconsistencies. All the inconsistencies are presented here, and CRA is focusing on all those findings, and then query are generated, and then during the next cycle of monitoring within this study, again, this cycle could be repeated several times because the amount of data is constantly changing. So it is like a general concept of how to combine centralized data analysis, digital tools, and on-site activities, and obviously it will require a very clear communication strategy and synchronization between data managers, statistical programmers, and monitors, and it could be related to specific sites and patients which are enrolled here in this country in this time point. So it is challenging, but I hope that this vision could be implemented, and it will be a good approach to combine centralized and on-site monitoring.
Yeah. Great vision. I agree with you. So here we wanted to demonstrate, in fact, that even the planning monitoring visits by applying different approaches, so adaptable monitoring or flat monitoring visits, provides different amounts of visits at the end of the day. And whenever we focus on adaptive monitoring visit schedule, we can see how strategic it is designed. So making more monitoring visits by launching or initiating sites, coaching them at the very beginning, and then reducing the monitoring visits, on-site monitoring visits, to have triggered and targeted strategy using the centralized monitoring for triggering the visits and targeting the visits. So this is an example from the real study. So I would like to skip this brainstorming session and poll question just for the sake of the time, and share a couple of examples, visuals, in fact, how again pattern recognition could help, so to say, during this preparation for on-site visits. And here, just an example about patient safety, for focus on patient safety. So if adverse events reporting is performed differently across the sites due to different medical standards or cultural differences, then a skewed serious adverse events reporting will result. So this is a risk from, again, a real study. This is how it looks like. Yeah, so that at certain point, serious adverse event reporting, in fact, goes in the red zone, where for certain, for example, for 6 visits, there are 9 SAEs reported for certain site. why this always sometimes happens, because, for example, investigators misunderstand how to classify serious adverse events versus adverse events. And this is sometimes cultural differences. Sometimes some medical standards are, again, different. And this is how the centralized monitoring can provide the guidance to monitor, to do this analysis. There are a couple of other visuals, which again I'm skipping, and they all demonstrate the approaches to detect anomalies, in fact, and helping us to understand it. So key takeaways which I want to briefly mention: I feel it's very crucial to create a holistic approach in monitoring. Yeah, so it's similar to well organized, coordinated orchestra. Yeah, so where on-site, centralized, and remote monitoring tools are playing together, and they harmoniously ensure the safety, quality, and integrity of a study. I feel also that there are benefits of on-site, there are benefits of centralized monitoring. Combined together, we could use the benefits of both approaches very efficiently. Using early detection, I think it's very crucial rather than late firefighting. And I feel also that a lot of optimization and cost reduction can happen in this case as well. And adaptability and continuous improvement now is the topic, obviously, so that we can, based on the guidance from FDA, we can highlight even more. So again, being adaptable to the situation, reviewing the monitoring plan, reviewing the risk assessment on a regular basis. It's now the best practice, which we believe will continue developing. Final words, Yuriy, from your side. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Artem. And I would like to say thank you for all participants, and you were with us all this 90 minutes. And thank you for your attention to those thoughts and ideas. And I suppose that the whole strategy is a big journey and a big organizational change, and it is not an easy task to implement. But I would be happy if you will use some elements of those combination between centralized monitoring and on-site monitoring and feel the taste of this combination. And it will mean that we were a little bit successful in our endeavors trying to combine those approaches and trying to think about better quality for data and for clinical research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, from my side. Thanks a lot, Yuriy, for joining us today, and always pleasure to hear your valuable insights. Thanks a lot.